The Mafia Boss discovered his Subjefe had handed him to the police, but he had already bought them. The amber glow of gaslight filtered through the smoke-thick air of the Crimson Room, Chicago's most notorious speakeasy hidden beneath Torino's tailoring shop on West Division Street. Vincent the Wolf, Torino, sat in his leather chair like a king on his throne, the scar running from his left temple to his jaw, catching the flickering light as he studied the ledgers spread before him. The year was 1926, and Prohibition had made men like Vincent wealthy beyond imagination. The establishment buzzed with the low murmur of conversations conducted in hushed tones, punctuated by the occasional clink of crystal glasses and the sultry voice of Marie Dubois crooning from the corner stage. Fedoras and fur coats adorned the clientele, a mix of businessmen, politicians, and those who preferred their dealings conducted away from prying eyes. Vincent's coal-black eyes never missed a detail. At 42, he had built an empire that stretched from the stockyards to the Gold Coast, controlling everything from bootleg whiskey to the numbers racket. His tailored three-piece suit, imported from London, spoke of success, but the bulge beneath his left arm reminded anyone foolish enough to cross him that violence was never far from his thoughts. Marcus Castellano approached the table with measured steps, his younger face betraying nothing of the turmoil churning in his chest. For 3 years, he had served as Vincent's underboss, his right hand in matters both legitimate and otherwise. Tonight, however, Marcus carried the weight of betrayal like a stone in his stomach. "Boss, the shipment from Detroit came in clean," Marcus reported, placing a manila envelope on the mahogany table. "No complications at the border. O'Malley's boys handled the transfer without incident." Vincent nodded, not looking up from his papers. The speakeasy's pianist began playing a melancholy tune that seemed to echo the tension Marcus felt building in his chest. For months, he had been feeding information to Detective Lieutenant Patrick Sullivan, believing he was doing the right thing, convinced that bringing down the Torino operation would make the streets safer for families like his own. Good. And the matter with the Sicilian Brotherhood. Vincent's voice was steady, controlled, but Marcus detected an undercurrent he couldn't quite identify. Resolved, they've agreed to stay south of Roosevelt Road. No more territorial disputes. Marcus shifted his weight, the floorboards creaking beneath his feet. The smoke from Vincent's cigarette curled upward like a ghostly finger pointing toward heaven, or perhaps damnation. What Marcus didn't know was that Detective Sullivan had been on Vincent's payroll for over 2 years. Every piece of information Marcus had passed along, every detail he thought would help the law bring justice, had been carefully orchestrated by Vincent himself. The wolf had been playing a game within a game, and Marcus was merely a pawn who had forgotten which side of the board he occupied. Vincent finally looked up, his dark eyes studying Marcus with the intensity of a predator sizing up its prey. "You look tired, my friend. Perhaps you should go home to that beautiful wife of yours. Elena, isn't it? And your boy, Tommy. How old is he now? 7? The mention of his family sent ice through Marcus's veins. In their world, family was sacred, but it was also leverage. Vincent had never mentioned them so directly before, and the casual way he spoke their names felt like a threat wrapped in silk. 8 next month, Marcus replied, his mouth suddenly dry. The jazz music seemed to grow louder, more discordant, as if the very air in the room had shifted. 8, Vincent repeated, savoring the word. A good age, old enough to understand loyalty, young enough to learn from his father's example. He stood slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the table. "Marcus, walk with me." They moved through the speakeasy, past tables where Chicago's elite conducted their dark business. Vincent nodded to familiar faces. Alderman Morrison, who controlled the South Side votes, Johnny the Hammer Torelli, who handled collections, and beautiful Vivian Cross, whose information network rivaled that of the Tribune's newsroom. The back office was Vincent's sanctuary, lined with books on philosophy and strategy, its walls adorned with photographs of him shaking hands with mayors and judges. A painting of the Chicago skyline dominated one wall, the city's towering buildings reaching toward a sky that seemed perpetually shrouded in smoke and shadow. "Do you know what I've learned in 20 years of running this organization, Marcus?" Vincent poured 2 glasses of genuine Irish whiskey. The real thing, not the rot-gut poison that killed men in the tenements. "What's that, boss?" That loyalty isn't just about what a man says, or even what he does. It's about what he doesn't do. The calls he doesn't make, the conversations he doesn't have, the people he doesn't meet with when he thinks nobody's watching. Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. The office suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in like a tomb. Outside, he could hear the elevated train rumbling past, carrying honest people home to their families while he stood in this den of iniquity, caught between two worlds and belonging fully to neither. Vincent raised his glass in a toast, his smile never reaching his eyes. To loyalty, Marcus, and to the painful lessons we sometimes must learn about trust. As they clinked glasses, Marcus realized with crystalline clarity that his carefully constructed double life was about to come crashing down around him. The wolf had been watching, waiting, and now the hunt was about to begin. The morning sun painted Chicago's skyline in shades of copper and gold, but Marcus Castellano felt only the gray weight of impending doom. He sat in his kitchen, watching his wife Elena pack Tommy's lunch for school, her dark hair catching the light from their small window that overlooked the bustling street below. Their apartment above Moretti's grocery was modest but warm, filled with the aroma of Elena's coffee and the sound of Tommy practicing his multiplication tables. You were late again last night," Elena said, without turning around, her voice carrying the familiar note of concern that had grown more pronounced over the past months. "Mrs. Kowalski next door said she heard you come in after midnight." Marcus studied his wife's profile, memorizing the curve of her jaw, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was worried. Business ran long. You know how Vincent gets when the numbers don't add up, right? It wasn't entirely a lie. Vincent did care about his numbers, but last night's extended meeting had been about something far more dangerous than accounting discrepancies. Marcus could still feel those dark eyes boring into his soul, searching for cracks in his facade. Tommy bounded into the kitchen, his school bag slung over one shoulder, his face bright with 8-year-old enthusiasm. "Papa, will you come to my baseball game Saturday? Coach says I might get to pitch." The innocence in his son's eyes was like a knife twisting in Marcus's chest. "I'll try, buddy. Your papa's got some important work to finish first." After Elena and Tommy left for the day, Marcus found himself staring at his reflection in their bedroom mirror. The face looking back at him was that of a stranger, hollow-eyed, drawn, caught between two masters who demanded absolute loyalty. He thought about Detective Sullivan, who had convinced him that bringing down the Torino operation was the right thing to do, the moral thing. But morality was a luxury men like Marcus couldn't afford, not when they had families to protect. The telephone rang, jolting him from his brooding. Vincent's voice crackled through the static, smooth as aged bourbon and twice as dangerous. "Marcus, my friend, I need you to come in early today. We have some administrative matters to discuss." "Of course, boss. Anything specific I should prepare for?" "Just bring yourself and Marcus. Take the long way. Enjoy the city. It's beautiful this time of year." The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at the receiver in his hand. In their coded language, that had been both an invitation and a warning. Vincent knew. The question now was how much, and what he intended to do about it. Marcus walked through Chicago's streets like a condemned man savoring his last meal. The city pulsed with life around him. Newsboys hawking headlines about Capone's latest legal troubles, vendors selling hot dogs from steam carts, women in fashionable coats hurrying to their jobs in the Loop's towering department stores. The elevated train rattled overhead, carrying workers to their honest jobs, their simple problems. He stopped at Holy Name Cathedral, drawn by an impulse he couldn't name. Inside, the soaring Gothic arches and stained glass windows created a sanctuary of peace that felt foreign to his corrupted soul. An elderly woman knelt in prayer, her rosary clicking softly in the hushed silence. Marcus had grown up in this church, had taken his first communion at its altar, had married Elena beneath its blessed dome. Father McKenna, now gray and stooped with age, had known him as an altar boy with dreams of becoming a teacher. How had that innocent child become this conflicted man, caught between the law and the lawless? "Vincent Torino owns half the police force," he whispered to the empty air, finally acknowledging the truth he had refused to see. Detective Sullivan's confidence, his assurances that they had Vincent surrounded, suddenly seemed naive at best, orchestrated at worst. The walk to the speakeasy felt like a funeral procession. The afternoon crowd was smaller, more intimate, composed mostly of Vincent's inner circle. Marcus recognized the faces, soldiers and enforcers who had proven their loyalty through blood and silence. They watched him with expressions that revealed nothing and everything. Vincent sat in his usual spot, but today the chair next to him was occupied by Detective Lieutenant Patrick Sullivan himself. The sight hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sullivan looked comfortable, relaxed, sipping what appeared to be Vincent's private stock whiskey, while they discussed something in low tones. "Ah, Marcus," Vincent's voice boomed with false warmth. "Come, join us. The detective was just telling me about some interesting intelligence he's received lately. Fascinating stuff about rats and sinking ships." Sullivan turned, and Marcus saw his own doom reflected in the detective's cold blue eyes. There was no recognition, no acknowledgement of their clandestine meetings, no hint that this man had convinced Marcus to betray everything he had sworn to protect. "Mr. Castellano," Sullivan nodded with professional courtesy. "Your boss here was just explaining how important loyalty is in any successful organization. Whether that's the police force or other enterprises." Marcus felt the world tilting beneath his feet. The speakeasy's warm amber light suddenly felt harsh, exposing. Every conversation he'd had with Sullivan played through his mind in a new context. Every piece of information he'd shared, every detail about Vincent's operations, every secret he'd betrayed, all of it had been feeding back to Vincent himself. "Sit down, Marcus," Vincent said gently, but it wasn't a request. "We have so much to discuss." As Marcus took his seat at the table where he had served faithfully for 3 years, he realized that the game had been rigged from the very beginning. The wolf hadn't just been hunting him, he had been herding him, guiding him exactly where he wanted him to go. And now, the trap was about to spring shut. The silence in Vincent's back office was suffocating. Marcus sat across from his boss, Detective Sullivan having mysteriously disappeared after their introduction, leaving behind only the lingering scent of his cheap cologne and the weight of his betrayal. The office's familiar comforts, the leather-bound books, the expensive whiskey, the photographs of Vincent with Chicago's power brokers, now felt like museum pieces in a mausoleum. Vincent opened a manila folder and spread its contents across the mahogany desk like a dealer, arranging cards for a final hand. Photographs, transcripts of telephone conversations, detailed reports of meetings Marcus thought had been conducted in absolute secrecy. His entire double life laid bare in black and white documentation that would have impressed the Tribune's most thorough reporters. "In 3 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days, Vincent said conversationally, lighting a cigarette with a gold lighter Elena had given Marcus for his birthday. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "That's how long you've been feeding information to Detective Sullivan. Quite a comprehensive operation you two had running." Marcus stared at a photograph of himself entering a diner on North Clark Street, the same diner where Sullivan had convinced him that bringing down the Torino organization was his patriotic duty. In the image, he looked furtive, guilty, exactly what he was. "I want you to know, Marcus, that I don't take any personal pleasure in this discovery. You've been like a brother to me. Your son calls me Uncle Vincent." The wolf's voice carried genuine sadness, which somehow made everything worse. "But business is business, and betrayal is betrayal. Vincent, I can explain." "No need." Vincent held up a hand, his scarred face impassive. "I understand perfectly. You have a family, a beautiful wife, a bright son with his whole future ahead of him. You wanted to protect them from what you saw as a dangerous world. Noble, really, if somewhat misguided?" Marcus found his voice, though it sounded foreign to his own ears. "Then you know why I did it? This life, this business, it's poison, Vincent. It corrupts everything it touches. I didn't want Tommy growing up in a world where his father was a criminal," Vincent finished, not unkindly. "Marcus, let me share something with you that Detective Sullivan neglected to mention during your patriotic conversations." Vincent pulled out another folder, this one thicker, more worn. Inside were bank statements, property deeds, business licenses, a paper trail that painted a very different picture of the man Marcus thought he knew. "Torino Construction has built half the schools on the south side. Torino Shipping employs 300 men who can feed their families because of the work we provide. The Torino Foundation, yes, we have a foundation, has funded more orphanages and hospitals than the archdiocese. Vincent's eyes never left Marcus's face. Tell me, what exactly did you think you were protecting your son from? The documents told a story Marcus had never heard, of a criminal organization that operated with the complexity and reach of a legitimate corporation. Money laundering, certainly, but also genuine philanthropy, violence when necessary, but also unprecedented charity. The black and white morality he had clung to began to blur into uncomfortable shades of gray. The illegal activities are a means to an end, Vincent interrupted. Do you think Mayor Thompson's administration would fund soup kitchens for Italian immigrants? Do you believe the police would protect our neighborhoods from the Irish gangs if we didn't provide them incentive? This is Chicago, Marcus. Idealism doesn't feed families or protect children from bullets. Outside the office, the speakeasy continued its evening routine. Marcus could hear the muted sounds of conversation, the clink of glasses, the sultry voice of Marie Dubois beginning her second set. Normal life, if anything about their world could be called normal, continuing while his own existence crumbled. What happens now? Marcus asked, the question barely above a whisper. Vincent studied him with those predator eyes, seeing everything, calculating possibilities. That depends on several factors. Your usefulness to the organization, your willingness to make amends, your understanding of what loyalty actually means. And Sullivan. A cold smile played at the corners of Vincent's mouth. Detective Sullivan has been a valued business partner for over 2 years. His information about police operations has saved us considerable trouble. His ability to identify potential informants within our organization has been invaluable. The full scope of his manipulation crashed over Marcus like a wave. He hadn't been a hero working undercover to bring down corruption. He had been a tool, unknowingly serving the very organization he thought he was betraying. Every meeting with Sullivan, every piece of information he'd shared, had been orchestrated to serve Vincent's purposes. You used me to feed him false information. Sometimes, other times, the information was quite real. It helped establish his credibility with his superiors. You see, a detective who occasionally provides genuine intelligence is trusted with more significant operations. Vincent's smile widened. The raid on Capone's operation last month? That was real intelligence, passed through you to Sullivan. It eliminated a competitor and enhanced the detective's reputation. Efficient. Marcus felt sick. He had been complicit in the destruction of rival organizations, in the consolidation of Vincent's power, all while believing he was working for justice. His moral certainty, his righteous indignation, had been weapons in Vincent's arsenal. Your wife called earlier, Vincent said casually, as if discussing the weather. Lovely woman. She was concerned because you hadn't come home for lunch as promised. I assured her that business was simply running long today. The mention of Elena sent ice through Marcus's veins. Leave my family out of this. Your family has been part of this from the beginning, Vincent replied. Every choice you made for them. Every betrayal was justified in your mind by your desire to protect them. They're not separate from this situation, Marcus. They're the reason for it. Vincent stood and walked to the window overlooking the speakeasy's main floor. Below, Chicago's elite continued their dark business, unaware that the loyalty of one man was being weighed in the balance above them. Here's what's going to happen, Vincent said without turning around. You're going to continue your relationship with Detective Sullivan. You're going to feed him exactly the information I provide, when I tell you to provide it. You're going to help us identify other potential problems within the organization. And you're going to do all of this with enthusiasm and gratitude. And if I refuse? Vincent turned back to face him, his expression compassionate and terrifying in equal measure. Then Elena becomes a widow. Tommy grows up without a father, and Detective Sullivan finds himself in need of a new informant. But that won't happen, will it, Marcus? Because despite your recent lapse in judgment, you're not a stupid man. Marcus understood with crystal clarity that he had traded one master for another, only to discover they were the same person. The wolf had been hurting him all along, and now the cage door was finally closing. Do we understand each other? Vincent asked. Marcus nodded, his voice barely audible. Yes. Good. Now, let's discuss your first assignment in your new, more honest role. 2 weeks passed like a fever dream. Marcus found himself living a triple life: loyal underboss to Vincent, double agent for Sullivan, and unknowing pawn in a game whose rules he was only beginning to understand. The weight of his situation pressed down on him like the smoke-heavy air of the speakeasy, making every breath an effort. Elena noticed the change immediately. Her husband, always intense, had become distant, distracted. He would stare at Tommy during dinner as if memorizing his face, hold her hand with desperate intensity during their evening walks through the neighborhood. When she asked what was troubling him, Marcus would only say that business was more complicated than usual. "Mrs. Torino invited me to tea tomorrow," Elena mentioned one morning, as Marcus prepared for another day of navigating his treacherous new reality. "She says Vincent speaks very highly of you at their dinner parties." Marcus nearly dropped his coffee cup. Catherine Torino, Vincent's wife of 15 years, was a force of nature in her own right, a woman who managed her husband's legitimate businesses with the same ruthless efficiency he applied to his illegal ones. That she was reaching out to Elena suggested Vincent was tightening the web around Marcus's family, drawing them deeper into the organization's orbit. "That's nice of her," Marcus managed. "Catherine's a remarkable woman. She mentioned that their daughter Isabella and Tommy are in the same grade at Sacred Heart. She thought they might become friends." Elena's voice carried excitement that made Marcus's stomach clench. It would be good for Tommy to have connections with successful families. Successful families. If Elena only knew how that success was built, on what foundation those connections rested. But perhaps that was Vincent's point, to make the criminal world seem normal, respectable, even desirable. At the speakeasy that afternoon, Marcus found Vincent in conversation with Johnny, the Hammer, Torelli, and Fat Tony Marconi, discussing expansion into the northern suburbs. The conversation paused as Marcus approached, the other men nodding respectfully before excusing themselves. In Vincent's organization, hierarchy was sacred, and Marcus's position as underboss commanded deference despite his current circumstances. "Ah, Marcus, sit. We need to discuss Detective Sullivan's next assignment." Vincent poured 2 glasses of whiskey, the ritual they had performed countless times now carrying new significance. "The federal agents have been sniffing around our import business. Sullivan needs to provide them with something substantial enough to satisfy their curiosity, but not damaging enough to actually hurt us." Marcus accepted the glass, noting how Vincent's scarred hand remained steady, while his own trembled slightly. "What did you have in mind?" "The Sicilian Brotherhood has been getting careless with their smuggling operation at the docks. They're using our territory, but forgetting to pay the proper taxes." Vincent's smile was predatory. "Think Sullivan will receive detailed intelligence about their next shipment. The feds get a major bust. Sullivan gets credit for breaking up a smuggling ring, and we eliminate competition while appearing to be victims of the same enforcement efforts." The elegant brutality of it was impressive and horrifying. Vincent wasn't just running a criminal organization. He was conducting an orchestra, with law enforcement, rival gangs, and his own people all playing parts in a symphony of controlled chaos. "There's more," Vincent continued. "Sullivan has mentioned to his superiors that he has a reliable informant deep within our organization. They want to meet this informant." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "Vincent, I can't. You can, and you will. Tomorrow night, you'll meet with Federal Agent Mitchell Harrison at the Palmer House Hotel, room 412. You'll provide him with carefully prepared intelligence about our operations, including detailed information about money laundering through our legitimate businesses. But that information will be completely accurate," Vincent finished. "The businesses we'll sacrifice are already scheduled for closure. The money they'll trace has already been moved to more secure accounts. Agent Harrison will believe he's made a major breakthrough in understanding our operations, while in reality, he'll be chasing shadows we've deliberately cast." Marcus stared into his whiskey glass, seeing his own distorted reflection in the amber liquid. "How long have you been planning this?" "From the moment you made contact with Sullivan." "Did you really think I didn't know about your evening visits to Holy Name Cathedral? Your sudden interest in reading the Tribune's crime coverage? Your wife's concerns about your late nights?" Vincent's voice carried amusement rather than anger. "Marcus, I've been watching you struggle with your conscience for months. It was only a matter of time before someone approached you, and Sullivan had been trying to develop sources in our organization for over a year. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Vincent had been orchestrating his recruitment by Sullivan, had probably arranged for their first meeting at the diner on North Clark Street. Every choice Marcus thought he had made independently had been guided by the wolf's invisible hand. You manipulated everything. I protected everything, Vincent corrected, including you, your family, and the stability of this organization. Sullivan needed a source within our operation, and I needed to control what information the police possessed. You provided the perfect solution to both problems. A commotion from the main floor interrupted their conversation. Through the office's frosted glass window, Marcus could see figures moving with urgent purpose. Vincent's expression sharpened, his relaxed demeanor vanishing like smoke. Fat Tony appeared in the doorway, his massive frame filling the opening. Boss, we got problems. The O'Brien crew hit one of our policy banks on West Madison. 3 of our boys are dead, including little Sal. Vincent stood slowly, his transformation from philosophical crime lord to dangerous predator complete. How many of them? 6, maybe 8. They knew exactly when the collection was happening, knew which of our guys would be there. Tony's eyes shifted to Marcus, suspicion clear in his gaze. Someone fed them information. The accusation hung in the air like gun smoke. Marcus felt every eye in the room focusing on him, weighing his loyalty, calculating his guilt. The timing was too convenient, too perfectly aligned with his recent exposure as an informant. Vincent studied Marcus with those penetrating dark eyes, reading secrets, measuring character, deciding fates. Marcus, I need you to reach out to your contacts in the O'Brien organization. Find out who gave them that information. Vincent, I swear to you, I know it wasn't you, Vincent said calmly. The O'Brien crew has been planning this for weeks, but someone in our organization has been talking to them, and I need to know who. Your unique position gives you access to information others don't have. Relief flooded through Marcus, followed immediately by a new understanding of his situation. Vincent wasn't just using his connection to Sullivan to control the police. He was using Marcus's reputation as a potential informant to flush out actual traitors within the organization. Set up a meeting with Agent Harrison for tomorrow night as planned, Vincent continued. But first, find our rat. The O'Brien crew just declared war, and I intend to end it quickly. As Fat Tony left to coordinate the organization's response, Vincent refilled their glasses. Outside, Chicago continued its relentless pace, unaware that blood had been spilled in the shadow of its towering buildings. One more thing, Marcus, Vincent said quietly. Catherine mentioned that Elena seemed lovely at tea today. Such a devoted mother, so concerned about Tommy's education and future. It would be a shame if this war with the O'Brien crew put innocent families at risk. The threat was delivered with Vincent's characteristic soft-spoken precision. Marcus understood that his family's safety now depended not just on his continued cooperation, but on his success in navigating the increasingly dangerous game Vincent had constructed around him. I understand, Marcus said, the words tasting like ashes in his mouth. I knew you would, Vincent replied, raising his glass. To family, Marcus, and to the lengths we go to protect the ones we love. As they drank, Marcus realized that Vincent hadn't just made him a double agent. He had made him a weapon, aimed at the heart of anyone who threatened the organization. The wolf had complete control now, and Marcus was no longer just prey. He had become part of the hunt. The Palmer House Hotel's lobby buzzed with the refined energy of Chicago's elite, but Marcus felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of respectability. Federal Agent Mitchell Harrison had chosen the meeting location well, public enough to seem casual, private enough for sensitive conversation. Room 412 overlooked the bustling street below, where honest citizens went about their evening business, unaware of the criminal conspiracy being orchestrated above their heads. Agent Harrison was younger than Marcus had expected, perhaps 35, with the lean build and sharp eyes of a man accustomed to hunting predators. He wore a well-tailored but unremarkable suit, the kind that would blend into any crowd while concealing the service revolver Marcus could see outlined beneath his jacket. Mr. Castellano, I appreciate you taking this risk, Harrison said, pouring coffee from a silver service that spoke of the federal government's unlimited budget for important operations. Detective Sullivan speaks very highly of your commitment to justice. Marcus accepted the coffee, noting how steady his hands had become over the past weeks. Deception, he was discovering, was a skill that improved with practice. I have a family, Agent Harrison. I want my son to grow up in a city where the law means something. Admirable. Now, let's discuss what you can tell us about Vincent Torino's money laundering operations. For the next hour, Marcus fed Harrison exactly the information Vincent had provided. Detailed financial records, shipping manifests, business transactions that painted a picture of massive criminal enterprise, while actually documenting activities Vincent had already abandoned or relocated. Harrison took notes with the enthusiasm of a man who believed he was dismantling a criminal empire. "This is extraordinary intelligence," Harrison said, reviewing the documents Marcus had provided. "Judy, with this information, we can build a case that will put Torino away for life." Marcus nodded appropriately while thinking about the real Vincent Torino, who at that moment was 3 floors below in the hotel's private dining room, meeting with Mayor Thompson and half the city council to discuss urban development initiatives that would give his organization legitimate control over Chicago's expanding infrastructure. "Yuri, there's something else," Marcus said, following Vincent's script precisely. "Torino's planning something big for next week, a summit meeting with all the major families. He's trying to consolidate control over the entire Midwest." Harrison's eyes lit up. "Where? When?" "The Biograph Theater on Lincoln Avenue, next Thursday night, after the last show. He's rented the entire building for what he's calling a private screening." Marcus paused, letting Harrison's imagination fill in the dramatic possibilities. Every major crime boss from Detroit to St. Louis will be there. What Marcus didn't mention was that the meeting was real, but its purpose wasn't criminal consolidation. It was Vincent's announcement that he was transitioning the organization toward legitimate business, using his criminal profits to buy respectability and political influence. The other crime families were being invited to follow his example or find themselves isolated and vulnerable. Harrison stood and paced to the window, his excitement barely contained. If we could arrest every major criminal leader in one location, it would be the crime story of the decade, Marcus agreed. But Agent Harrison, if this operation fails, if there's any indication that the information came from me, your identity will be protected absolutely. You have my word. Marcus wondered how many informants had heard those same words before disappearing into the Chicago River. But Vincent had prepared for that contingency as well. As Marcus left the Palmer house, he felt the weight of multiple betrayals pressing down on him, like the city's perpetual blanket of smoke and smog. He was betraying Agent Harrison by feeding him false information, betraying his own conscience by serving Vincent's purposes, and betraying his original motivation by protecting a criminal organization he had once wanted to destroy. The walk back to the speakeasy took him through neighborhoods where the O'Brien crew's recent aggression was already visible. Broken windows, hastily erected barricades, the lingering scent of gunpowder and fear. The war Vincent had predicted was escalating, and innocent families were caught in the crossfire. At the Crimson Room, Marcus found Vincent holding court with his inner circle, discussing strategy with the calm precision of a general planning a campaign. The atmosphere was tense but controlled. These were professionals who understood that emotion was a luxury they couldn't afford. "How did your federal friend react to our intelligence?" Vincent asked as Marcus joined the group. "Like a man who thinks Christmas came early. He's already planning the raid on the Biograph Theater." Vincent's scarred face showed satisfaction. "Excellent. By Thursday night, every federal agent and police officer in Chicago will be watching an empty building while we conduct our actual business elsewhere." Fat Tony looked up from cleaning his Thompson submachine gun. "What about the O'Brien problem? They hit another one of our places this afternoon, the candy store on Halstead." Vincent's expression darkened. "Did we lose anyone?" "2 wounded, none dead. But they're getting bolder, boss. Word is they think we're weak because of the federal pressure." Marcus saw an opportunity to prove his loyalty while serving Vincent's larger purpose. "I might be able to help with that. My contact with Agent Harrison gives me access to federal intelligence about organized crime activities. I could find out what they know about the O'Brien crew's operations." Vincent studied him with those penetrating dark eyes, weighing possibilities, calculating risks. "Do it. But carefully, Marcus. We can't afford to expose your position with the Federals until we've maximized its usefulness." As the meeting dispersed, Vincent asked Marcus to remain. The office felt different now, less like a sanctuary and more like a command center. Maps of Chicago covered one wall, marked with colored pins indicating territories, rival operations, and federal surveillance activities. "Your son had his baseball game today," Vincent said conversationally. Catherine mentioned that Elena was there, cheering quite enthusiastically. The casual mention of his family sent the familiar chill through Marcus's chest. "Tommy pitched 3 innings. His team won." "Wonderful. It's important for boys to experience success, to understand that winning is possible if they're willing to make the necessary sacrifices." Vincent poured himself a drink, not offering one to Marcus. "Speaking of sacrifices, I need you to understand something about Thursday night's operation." Marcus waited, sensing that Vincent was about to reveal another layer of the game they were playing. "Agent Harrison won't be the only one watching the Biograph Theater. The O'Brien crew has been fed the same information through different channels. They'll be planning their own operation, an attempt to eliminate every major crime boss in one devastating attack." The implications crashed over Marcus like a wave. "You're using the federal sting as bait for the O'Brien crew. I'm solving multiple problems with one elegant solution," Vincent corrected. "The O'Brien crew will expose themselves attempting to attack a meeting that isn't happening. The federal agents will arrest them in the act, eliminating our competition while enhancing their own reputation. And we'll be completely absent from the entire affair, conducting our real business in peaceful anonymity." Marcus stared at the criminal mastermind who had orchestrated his betrayal, his recruitment, and now his unwitting participation in what amounted to a mass execution. "How many people are going to die Thursday night?" "Only the ones who deserve to," Vincent replied. "The O'Brien crew chose war, Marcus. I'm simply choosing the battlefield." Outside the office window, Chicago stretched toward the horizon, its lights twinkling like stars fallen to earth. Somewhere in those lights, Elena was tucking Tommy into bed, reading him a story about heroes and villains, good and evil, right and wrong. Simple concepts that seemed to belong to a different world than the one Marcus now inhabited. "Get some sleep," Vincent suggested. "Thursday is going to be a very long day." As Marcus walked home through the city's shadowed streets, he realized that Vincent had done more than manipulate him into betraying his principles. He had made Marcus complicit in a plan that would use law enforcement itself as an instrument of criminal justice. The Thursday night massacre at the Biograph Theater would go down in Chicago history as a federal triumph. Agent Harrison would be hailed as the man who broke up a massive criminal conspiracy and eliminated the dangerous O'Brien crew in one brilliant operation. The newspapers would praise law enforcement's tactical brilliance, never knowing they had been choreographed by the very criminal they thought they were hunting. And Marcus would remain Vincent's most valuable asset, a man with unquestioned access to federal intelligence, a reputation for loyalty tested by fire, and the desperate motivation of a father who would do anything to protect his family. As he climbed the stairs to his modest apartment, Marcus could hear Tommy's laughter echoing from their kitchen, where Elena was helping him with homework. The sound was pure innocence, untainted by the corruption that had consumed his father's soul. Marcus paused at his own door, key in hand, understanding finally that there would be no redemption for him, no return to the simple moral clarity he had once possessed. Vincent had won completely, not just his loyalty, but his identity. Marcus Castellano, the man who had wanted to protect his family from the criminal world, no longer existed. In his place stood Vincent's most trusted lieutenant, a man who would smile at federal agents while feeding them carefully crafted lies, who would embrace his wife while knowing that her safety depended on his continued service to organized crime, who would teach his son about right and wrong while living a life that embodied neither. The wolf had not just captured his prey, he had transformed it, making Marcus into another predator in his pack. And as Marcus opened the door to join his family for dinner, he carried with him the bitter knowledge that some betrayals could never be undone, some prices could never be fully paid, and some games could never truly be won, only survived. Chicago's neon lights flickered against the November darkness, casting long shadows where honest men walked beside criminals, where federal agents unknowingly served organized crime, and where a father's love had become the foundation of his damnation. In the Windy City, the line between law and lawlessness had always been negotiable, But Vincent Torino had proven that even justice itself could be bought, sold, and owned by those with the vision to see beyond conventional morality. The game would continue, with new players, new betrayals, new prices to be paid. But for Marcus Castellano, the outcome was already decided. He had chosen his side not through ideology or greed, but through the most powerful motivation of all, the desperate love of a father who would sacrifice everything, including his soul, to protect his family. And in Vincent's world, that made him the most dangerous kind of ally, and the most valuable kind of slave. Thursday, November 18th, 1926, 8:47 p.m. The Biograph Theater stood like a monument to Chicago's appetite for illusion, its marquee advertising Charlie Chaplin's latest picture to an empty street. Federal agents crouched in doorways and behind parked automobiles, their breath forming small clouds in the November cold as they waited for the criminal summit that would never come. Agent Harrison checked his pocket watch for the dozenth time, his confidence beginning to crack like ice on the Chicago River. "Where are they, Detective Sullivan?" Sullivan's face remained impassive, but Marcus could see the man's growing unease. 3 hours of surveillance had produced nothing but shadows, and the occasional drunk stumbling home from legitimate speakeasies. Maybe they got spooked. These people are paranoid by nature. From his position across Lincoln Avenue, Marcus watched the federal operation with the bitter knowledge of what was actually unfolding. Vincent's real meeting was taking place 15 miles away at the Drake Hotel, where he was announcing his organization's transition into legitimate business to Chicago's political elite. The criminal leaders from Detroit and St. Louis were there as invited guests, not conspirators, witnesses to Vincent's transformation from crime boss to respectable businessman. But the O'Brien crew was coming. Marcus had seen their preparation through Vincent's network of informants, 8 men armed with Thompson submachine guns, planning to turn the theater into a slaughterhouse. What they didn't know was that their target had changed. At 9:15 p.m., Vincent's prediction proved accurate. The O'Brien crew's black Cadillacs rounded the corner with mechanical precision, their occupants unaware they were driving into a federal trap. Marcus felt his stomach clench as he recognized young Danny O'Brien in the lead car, barely 20 buys, following his uncle's path towards certain destruction. The first shots shattered the November silence like breaking glass. Federal agents poured from their hiding places as the O'Brien gunmen realized they had walked into an ambush. The rat-a-tat-tat of Tommy guns echoed off the theater's brick walls, punctuated by the sharper cracks of police revolvers. Marcus found himself running toward the gunfire, driven by an impulse he couldn't name. Agent Harrison was pinned behind an overturned automobile, blood streaming from a graze across his forehead. Detective Sullivan had taken cover in the theater's doorway, his service weapon drawn but unfired. "Sullivan!" Marcus shouted over the gunfire. Harrison's hit. What happened next would replay in Marcus's mind for the rest of his life. As he reached for the wounded federal agent, Sullivan's gun swung toward him. In that frozen moment, Marcus saw recognition in the detective's eyes, not of an ally, but of a liability that needed elimination. The shot took Sullivan in the chest before he could fire. Fat Tony Marconi emerged from the theater's side alley, his .45 automatic smoking in his massive hand. "Vincent's orders," he said simply. Couldn't let the detective clean house. As federal agents overwhelmed the surviving O'Brien gunmen, Marcus knelt beside Agent Harrison, applying pressure to his wound, while his mind raced to process what had just occurred. Vincent hadn't just orchestrated the elimination of his enemies, he had removed a corrupt asset who knew too much. "The informant," Harrison gasped, grabbing Marcus's coat with bloody fingers. Sullivan said, "You were the informant." Marcus met the agent's eyes, seeing his own reflection in their clouding depths. "Detective Sullivan was feeding you exactly what Vincent Torino wanted you to know. Agent Harrison, every piece of intelligence, every operation, every target, all of it carefully crafted to serve his purposes." Harrison's grip weakened as shock set in. "Then I'm nobody's hero," Marcus said quietly. "I'm just a man trying to keep his family alive." Friday, November 19th, 1926. Chicago Tribune. Headline: Federal agents smash O'Brien gang in dramatic shootout. Detective Sullivan dies hero's death in battle against organized crime. Vincent's morning newspaper lay open on his desk as Marcus entered the speakeasy's office. The wolf looked satisfied but not triumphant, a man who had executed a complex plan with surgical precision. "Agent Harrison will recover," Vincent said without looking up. "The Tribune is calling him the hero who broke the O'Brien gang's reign of terror. He'll be promoted within the month, probably transferred to Washington, where his experience with deep cover operations will be valuable to the Bureau." Marcus took his usual seat, noting how the morning light streaming through the windows seemed different somehow, cleaner, less filtered through smoke and shadow. "And us. We are officially victims of the same criminal elements that Agent Harrison so courageously defeated. The federal investigation into our organization has been quietly closed. Hard to justify continued surveillance of crime victims." Vincent's scarred smile held genuine warmth. "Your position as my underboss is now unquestionable. The man who risked his life to save a federal agent is beyond suspicion." The elegant brutality of it was complete. Vincent had used Marcus's recruitment by Sullivan to eliminate multiple threats while enhancing his organization's legitimacy. The federal government would now owe them protection rather than persecution. "There's something else," Vincent continued, producing a manila envelope from his desk drawer. "Torino Construction has been awarded the contract to build Chicago's new municipal hospital. The project will require a construction supervisor with experience managing large, complex operations." Marcus stared at the contract documents, recognizing the golden handcuffs for what they were: a legitimate job, substantial salary, respect in the community, everything he had wanted for his family, built on a foundation of blood and betrayal. "The position comes with a house in Oak Park," Vincent added. "The good schools, clean streets, the kind of neighborhood where a boy can grow up believing in heroes and justice. Elena will love it." The trap was perfect in its generosity. Vincent was offering Marcus everything he had claimed to want: legitimacy, security, a future for Tommy free from criminal influence. The price was his continued complicity in the organization's activities, now dressed in the respectable clothing of municipal contracts and political connections. "What about the rat who fed information to the O'Brien crew?" Marcus asked, buying time to process his impossible situation. Vincent's expression darkened slightly. "Ah, yes, that unpleasant business." He pressed a button on his desk, and Vivian Cross entered the office. The beautiful chanteuse looked different in daylight, harder, more dangerous, like a blade concealed in silk. "Tell him what you discovered," Vincent instructed. "Catherine," Vivian said simply. Vincent's own wife was feeding information to the O'Brien crew. She thought she could manipulate the situation to eliminate both Vincent and his rivals, leaving her free to take control of the legitimate businesses. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Catherine Torino, the woman who had befriended Elena, who had invited Tommy to play with her daughter, had been orchestrating a war that would have destroyed both families. "Where is she now?" Marcus asked. "Visiting her sister in California," Vincent replied calmly. "Indefinitely. Our marriage, it seems, was another casualty of the changing times." Marcus understood that Catherine Torino would never return to Chicago, would never threaten Vincent's organization again. The wolf had eliminated his final vulnerability, sacrificing even his wife to protect his empire. "So you see, Marcus, loyalty is indeed the most precious commodity in our business. You've proven yours beyond question, and I reward loyalty generously." As Vincent spoke, Marcus realized that his choice had been made the moment he decided to save Agent Harrison's life. He could have let Sullivan kill the federal agent, could have walked away from the gunfight, could have chosen his criminal loyalty over basic human decency. Instead, he had revealed his true character, a man who would risk everything to save an innocent life. "I accept the construction contract," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his heart. "But I want your word that Elena and Tommy will never be touched by this business again. They get to live normal lives." "You have it," Vincent replied. "Your family will be protected, prosperous, and completely insulated from our traditional activities. Tommy will grow up believing his father is simply a successful construction executive." 6 months later, Oak Park, Illinois. Marcus stood in the doorway of his son's bedroom, watching Tommy sleep in clean sheets beneath a window that looked out on tree-lined streets where children played safely. Elena moved beside him, her hand finding his in the darkness. "The hospital project is going well," she asked softly. "Very well. We should be finished by Christmas." Marcus squeezed her hand, feeling the gold wedding band that symbolized promises he had both kept and broken. "Tommy's teacher says he's doing excellent work in mathematics. He wants to be an engineer like his father," Elena said with pride that made Marcus's chest tighten. "He says he wants to build things that help people." Through their bedroom window, Marcus could see the Chicago skyline glowing against the night sky, its lights twinkling like distant stars. Somewhere in that constellation of illumination, Vincent Torino was conducting the business of his transformed organization, legitimate on its surface, profitable in its depths, respectable in its methods. The municipal hospital rising on Chicago's south side would bear a bronze plaque, crediting Torino Construction for its dedication to public service and community improvement. Thousands of patients would receive care in its halls, never knowing their healing was built on a foundation of calculated violence and strategic betrayal. Marcus had become what Vincent always intended, a bridge between the criminal world and legitimate society, a man whose reputation for integrity made him invaluable to both sides. He supervised construction projects by day and consulted on security matters by night, his dual existence so seamlessly integrated that even he sometimes forgot where one ended and the other began. The newspaper on his nightstand carried a small item about Agent Harrison's promotion to assistant director of the Bureau's Chicago office. The man whose life Marcus had saved now supervised the federal fight against organized crime in the Midwest, unaware that his most successful operation had been choreographed by the criminals he sought to capture. As Elena drifted off to sleep beside him, Marcus stared at the ceiling and calculated the price of his choices. His family was safe, prosperous, and genuinely happy. Tommy was excelling in school, making friends, playing baseball with the unconscious joy of a child who had never known fear. Elena had joined the Oak Park Women's Club, was taking art classes, had found a social circle that appreciated her intelligence and warmth. The cost of this suburban paradise was Marcus's soul, paid in installments of compromise and complicity that had transformed him from reluctant criminal to willing architect of his own damnation. He had not just survived Vincent's game, he had learned to play it with skill that surprised even himself. In the distance, a train whistle echoed across the prairie, carrying honest cargo to honest destinations. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to remember the man he had been before. Vincent Torino showed him that morality was a luxury only the powerless could afford, that love could be both salvation and chains, that sometimes the greatest victory was simply surviving long enough to protect the things that mattered most. The wolf had won completely, but in the arithmetic of family and survival, Marcus wondered if perhaps they both had. Chicago Tribune, December 15, 1926. Torino Municipal Hospital opens to serve city's poor. Construction executive Marcus Castellano praised for community service. New facility represents hope for Chicago's future. In the photograph accompanying the article, Marcus stood beside Vincent at the hospital's dedication ceremony, both men wearing respectable suits and political smiles. To the casual observer, they appeared to be exactly what the caption claimed, successful businessmen contributing to their community's welfare. But in Vincent's eyes, barely visible in the newspaper's grainy reproduction, was the satisfied expression of a predator who had successfully trained another wolf to run in his pack. And in Marcus's stance, in the way he held his shoulders and the set of his jaw, was the posture of a man who had learned to carry the weight of necessary sins without letting them crush his spirit. The game continued, with new players, new stakes, new prices to be paid. But for Marcus Castellano, the outcome was finally settled. He had chosen his family over his conscience, survival over heroism, pragmatic love over abstract justice. In Chicago, where the wind carried both prayers and curses, where honest men and criminals shared the same streets and sometimes the same dreams, that was perhaps the only victory that truly mattered.